wanted to say a little bit about the situation in Ukraine. Well, obviously, it's still not good that the conflict is still raging. This is the fifth day since Russia's illegal invasion into this sovereign state. The Russian media is not even allowed to call it an invasion, even though Putin used that word himself initially, or a war. They have to call it a special military operation. So it shows how Putin has made war even against his own language. Part of his broader war on truth. People can't tell the plain and blatant truth, and obviously been lying to his people, to the public, to his soldiers, saying that there was not going to be a war, that this was Russophobic hysteria. Well, it was obviously a truthophobic hysteria on his part. But anyway, the pushback has been stronger than he anticipated. The trouble is, he's been in a bubble, surrounded by yes men and sycophants, and there's been speculation that 2 years in virtual isolation had a deleterious effect on his mental health. There might be some cognitive declension anyway, that he's 69, possibly got Parkinson's and or cancer, things like that. Does he feel that the icy hand of death is stalking up on him, so needs to complete his legacy before he dies, or more likely before health forces him to retire? Um, so the invasion's not been going particularly well for Russia. I mean, not terrible. There are these claims and counterclaims of losses. It's difficult to know what's true. The Ukrainians claiming to have destroyed 146 Russian tanks. I would expect that to be inflated. European people tend to be optimistic to exaggerate the number of enemy units or soldiers they've destroyed and then underreport their own losses. Certainly, the United Nations has confirmed 64 civilian deaths. The likely civilian death toll is probably much higher than that. But these are the ones that they are sure have been killed in the conflict. Other people don't know if this person being killed or even injured. This person is injured, might yet die, and on and on. So Ukrainians suggested a ceasefire. Russia said no to that. They suggested talking. It's true. I mean, what Audrey says. I thought the Russian people might rally behind it once it begun. Obviously, it's difficult to say because there are not many opinion polls, but it doesn't appear they're enthused. There's a very subdued reaction to it. And even reports of small scale mutinies in the Russian armed forces. A Belarusian veteran gallantly came out and said that he doesn't want this war. And there are reports of the Belarusian military is actually fighting alongside Russia. They said they wouldn't be a co-belligerent. Maybe Putin has strong-armed them into it because Lukashenko's only hope of survival is massive financial support from them. So the economic repercussions of this are graver than were represented to Putin. But Putin simply refuses to be told the truth. There was a very revealing cabinet meeting he had. It was the broadcast from this ridiculously large room, him at the end of an absurdly large table, just to try and underscore his importance. Often in Russia, I mean, the size is demonstrated. Size used to demonstrate opulence. And I mean, I am big, 6'1" and broad-shouldered, and the chairs will be like too big even for me sometimes, and the table's just that bit higher than you'd expect, and so on. Um, so asking whether they're in favour of this, and some of them demurred and mumbled and vacillated a bit, but all said that they were in the end, so patently they weren't, but they knew if you disagree with the boss, your career is over. Or the other one saying, one of them said, well, I don't think they should, Luhansk and Donbass should join Russia. And Putin immediately corrected him because the guys obviously got to the next stage of the script. That's the next scene. Saying, no, 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 recognize their independence a few days ago, not integrate them into Russia. But obviously, that is a step preparatory to their absorption into the Russian Federation. So the fighting goes on, and Germany has broken its tradition since 1945 of actually shipping weapons to other countries. I know they've fought in United Nations missions abroad, like Afghanistan, but this time they're actually shipping weapons to one party to a conflict. They're finally exercising the ghost of 1939. Of course, Germany is a completely normal, very humane, very free country, an absolute model country. So it'd be racist to say that they shouldn't pursue military or foreign policy the same as anybody else. There's no original sin on Germans. There's no damnosa hereditas they've got to expunge. So yeah, they're right to do so. And as President Zelensky correctly said that Ukraine is the front line of freedom everywhere. If this tyrant gets away with it, who's next on his menu? There'll be another victim who'll pay a very heavy price. And then Putin was obviously rattled. That's why he's making these highly irresponsible threats, saying he's putting his military on high alert. The leadership in Russia is a puppets of the oligarchy. Well, I don't think. Well, I tell you who put Zelensky there: the ordinary people of Ukraine. In that runoff election, he got 70% of the vote. And yes, he presumably had alliances with wealthy people who donated to his campaign. That's not surprising. He thought he had a cordial relation with Ihor Kolomoisky, who owned that TV channel where Zelensky made his name as a comedian. He was propelled from being an actor to the presidency through this expletive-laden rant about some impoverished teacher who just can't take it anymore with these kleptocrats who are running his country. And he's trying to clean that up. Obviously, the whole thing made it an awful lot harder by having to spend so much money in battling Russia and some of the kleptocrats being pro-Moscow. So Putin wrongly imagined that quite a few Ukrainians would come over to his side, but that's not the case. Now, the Russian army was broadly welcomed in Donbass, Luhansk, and Crimea, but not in the rest of the country, even Kharkiv, a mostly Russophone city. And there's been fierce fighting. So Russia is slow, it's a lumbering giant. They put great faith in firepower. They've always believed a lot in artillery, so they're not into blitzkriegs. I know they fought a very fast campaign in Manchuria in the dying days of the Second World War, but otherwise speed is not their style. So there's a meeting right now on the border between Belarus and Ukraine, and the Belarusian foreign minister was midwifing it, even though, as I say, his country at the very least was guilty of accessoryship to Russia's act of naked aggression in permitting the Russian troops to use their countries as a springboard for this barbarous attack on Ukraine. So the delegations are meeting there. I'm not sure where Zelensky is. Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, is still in the capital city. The city still hasn't fallen. People are out and about in the city to try and fetch food, but that will run out quite soon. So far as I know, drinking water hasn't been cut off. I thought Ukraine would cut off drinking water to Crimea, which is, of course, Ukrainian straight away, because that's where Crimea's drinking water comes from. Now, you don't want all these people dying of thirst. We'll say, we withdraw, we'll turn it back on again, or blow up the pipeline, giving the Russians a huge logistical headache to supply drinking water to 3 million people, or start evacuating people out of there. I mean, you can melt snow and stuff, but is that going to be clean enough to be potable, and all this kind of thing? So the Russian ruble has suffered a 30% hit in the past 5 days, just unprecedented. Their stock market has fallen vertiginously. So there's been a precipitous decline in the values of their companies. But they haven't cut off oil and gas sales to European countries. Admittedly, they've been very low for several months, driving prices sky high. For all Putin's talk of stability, that's absolute bull. I mean, he's a man who so often plays opposites. Invading other countries is not stability. Gassing many civilians in Syria is not stability. Trying to destabilize other countries, undermine democracy, overthrow leaders, murder dissidents at home and abroad, poison the president of Ukraine, Lukashenko, way back in 2003 would be an example of that. So a lot of all Russian airlines being banned from European Union airspace, and then Russia's hit back, banning airlines from 36 countries flying through their airspace. So I know tourism was hoped was going to make a comeback. We're finally coming out of the coronavirus situation this year, but it looks like it's not going to be the case. Aeroflot and most other airlines from the Russian Federation are likely to go bust this year because they're losing something like 50% of their destinations. They can't go fly to other destinations, but you have to fly a longer way around. Is going to be bad for EU airlines as well, British ones, and so on. Putin is clearly worried, which is why he's trying to intimidate people, which is what he always does. He tries to rule by fear. He's an absolute scumbag. I revile him. He was quite carefully calculating, would prepare his moves, but this time he's clearly miscalculated. He's gone too far, and he's tended to unite the European Union and unite NATO. Now, you might say the Western reaction has pushed him closer to China, perhaps, although China's not completely happy with what he's doing, but I think he's trying to move us closer to China anyway. They would like the United States to abandon NATO, but NATO has finally realised, well, European NATO countries have got to spend more on their military. They're also supposed to spend 2% of their GDP. I think France and the United Kingdom are the only ones that do. So finally, Germany's going to come up to that level because it's difficult to have generous welfare and an outstanding healthcare system if you spend an awful lot on the military. Well, that's enough from me. I would like this war to be over. I wish it hadn't started. And it's entirely the fault of President Putin and his crime family of a Camarilla. So I would like you Russians to be free as well. There we go. But anyway, I think these talks will probably lead nowhere. Ukraine is not going to meet all these unreasonable demands. Conflict will probably resume. As I say, I think it's going to last over a month. All right, toodaloo.